Hey, it's Jack. So I just bought a 1966 Mustang on an online auction, sight unseen. And I'm not a car guy. Most people would say it was a risky move, or at a minimum, not very smart. So you know what I did? I called the High 10 service in Coon Rapids and had my buddy Scott Schulte take a look at it. Everything is going to be fine. Scott and his team got it running and didn't break the bank to do it. You should take your car to High 10 service in Coon Rapids. They fix normal cars too, not just gorgeous classic cars like mine. Go to high10service.com and schedule your appointment online right now. That's high10service.com.
It's the Jack Tomczak Show.
Good afternoon, Twin Cities. Up and let's go. Welcome to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm Jack Tomczak. On the show today we have Kim Crockett, who is one of the Republican candidates for Secretary of State. And thanks for coming in, Kim.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
All right, now we're going to do an hour of serious policy discussion.
Okay.
So try to make it exciting.
I'm ready.
All right, the first question everybody gets is, who are you and why are you running? Go.
All right. I'm Kim Crockett, kind of a well-known policy advocate, longtime attorney here in Minnesota. Why am I running? Well, I'm a little tired of wondering if my vote counted in elections. You know, as conservatives, Republicans, we've complained for years about our sloppy election laws, which of course they are, and they've gotten sloppier just over the last couple of sessions over there. But we also had some big trends.
Okay.
Which we'll get into, like Zuckerberg money coming into the state, consent decrees where the Secretary of State changed voting laws without the nuisance of legislation. That one's the one that really is the one that really set me off. So I've been writing about this, focusing on election law. And for those people who know me as a policy person in the state, from my days at Center of the American Experiment and other places.
List all those places.
There's lots. I've done lots of things.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to list them all. You sound like you're bragging. And we don't do that here in Minnesota.
Well, you are not bragging because I asked you. So now you have to answer.
So I have permission.
What are all of the organizations in the time you've been involved in Minnesota policy or politics that you have been either worked for or been with in some way, shape, or form?
Well, the politics side that people might not know about me is a number of years ago, early 2000s, I was an two-term, 8-year city councilwoman.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I knew you back then.
Right. I just, like I said, I don't brag about stuff. Yeah, when I'd show up at those rallies down at the Capitol and you and I would have fun with Ben or whatever up there, I had young kids, and I did an 8-year stint as a city councilwoman.
Where?
Deep Haven.
Okay.
I chaired the fire board, had a lot of fun with my firemen, and I've always been involved.
That line's going to come back and haunt you.
Okay, let me revise that
drop.
line. So they would come to me saying, Kim, we want a new truck, we want a boat, whatever, and I'd say, hey, you guys are great. I'll get you new safety equipment because you're my fireman. Maybe on the boat if you can get a free dock, right? And that'd be it. And they'd be like, okay. So that was fun.
Okay.
That's what Republicans ought to be doing, frankly, is serving on those local city councils, school boards, those kinds of things. And then after those years, I launched I was a corporate lawyer. I was a vice president at a national bank.
Okay.
And then I got this come hither during the Obama years. He wanted to take over healthcare. And I thought, well, if they've got our healthcare, they own us, right? They can boss us around. And I was writing a lot of op-eds for the Star Tribune, doing a little radio. And that's when I was asked to take over the Free Market Institute.
Okay.
Little history, Patty Anderson was running it, and she went and ran for governor. So I got pulled in. And a couple years later, after lots of chats with the Center of the American Experiment, I merged it into the center, which turned out to be a really good thing for everybody. Spent well over a decade there, and then went over to Intellectual Takeout with Devin Foley for a while, and then shifted into the election space. My spidey sense went off, in 2020, I looked around and said, I don't like what I see coming in Minnesota. And this is before Zuckerbucks and before the consent decrees and so forth. So I ended up doing some volunteer work for Minnesota Voters Alliance, Andy Sillick's group. Yep. Great people. They do good things. And eventually, because I was writing, volunteering for the Republican Lawyers for Trump, the Republican National Lawyers Association, all these things, wherever I could, I was just soaking it all up. I got hired by American Majority, Ned Ryan's group, which is based out of Virginia. He's fun. He's a fun guy and quite a critic of the Republican Party, by the way. Great conservative. But he hired...
should be.
He is. Yeah. He's fun. You should talk to him sometime. Have him on your show. Okay, good. And
in the state for American Majority, that's where Jennifer DeJournette is.
Yes,
and
Lonnie
Leitner.
Leitner. Yeah, those are my colleagues. Up until that was a C3. They have a C4, but I was working for the C3 as a consultant. Okay. So they sent me all over the state to talk about election integrity. So, but I had to leave, when I decided to run. Sure. And I'll tell you why I decided to do that. But the reason why, I mean, that's all kind of a lead up into my qualifications to run for Secretary of State. I have developed a pretty deep expertise, not just in Minnesota's election law and problems, but, on a national basis. So I was writing for publications nationally and so forth. So that's a little bit about me. Okay. I think this is the most important office on the statewide ticket, if not the entire ticket. And not because of me. Has nothing to do with me. It's because if we do not have election integrity, or even if we do, but people don't believe it, there's no confidence in the outcome, we don't really have what we need as a state to function, get along, maybe dial things down in terms of the divisiveness, the lack of confidence in government. We're so divided as a people.
If people don't trust that elections were done fairly, then things like that's the first step into everything falling apart.
Yeah, civil breakdown.
Yep.
Yeah, Jefferson called it the ark of safety. And it's a really long quote that you have to have. It's on my website, actually, under the bio, I think. But by the way, I have a great URL. You're going to love this, Jack.
Okay.
KimSOS.com.
I like it. Double meaning.
Because who knows how to spell Crockett in Minnesota?
I've known you for 20 years, and I didn't know if it was 2 T's or 1 at the end.
There you go. I can't spell Tomczak.
Nobody can.
So I know. I'm like, where's the C? Where's the Z? Just Jack.
CZAK.
Yeah. So he called it the ark of safety, where we resolve our differences in a peaceful manner, right? Because if we can't resolve our differences peacefully, what's the alternative?
Not peacefully.
We don't want to go there.
Yeah, nobody does. Well, some people do, but that's bad for
everybody.
Right,
but that's not me. That's not you, or most of the people on the other side of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
So, because Minnesota's had these really sloppy laws, and this is a tradition that started, frankly, under Joan Grow. Mary Kiffmeyer did her best to right the ship when she was Secretary of State. I think the thing that really got in the way of reform efforts she was making was the Bush v. Gore. Okay. The hanging chads and the other side lost confidence when the U.S. Supreme Court decided that Bush was the president, not Al Gore.
Yeah.
And then we've had 16 years of socialist Democrats, frankly. Mark Ritchie. And now Steve Simon, I call him Simon Says, and they're not the Democrats that like your dad's Democrats, right?
I think Democrats have definitely changed.
They have changed.
Elected Democrats, establishment Democrats are way different than what Democrats had been.
Yeah, like the Democrats we know in our lives wouldn't behave this way, where they ignore black letter law, make deals.
Famous podcaster Ben Cruzy and I sat down and watched the Kennedy-Nixon debates from the early 60s, and it was two guys arguing how much they loved the country.
Right. Can you imagine?
Right? And then compare that to presidential debates now, and it's just so different, both in tone and tenor, and also the position that the Democrats have taken about the country. It's like we're not competing with who loves the country the most anymore.
Right.
They hate it.
They are tearing it. They're tearing it apart, and they're tearing us apart as a result.
Yeah.
I don't think they represent. In fact, I threw it up on either Twitter or Facebook the other day, where there was yet another assault on our character as Americans through this effort to take over elections nationally. And we'll talk about that too. I'm part of this national network that helped defeat that in Congress recently. I mean, we ought to be celebrating that victory, Jack.
I don't think anybody
we should cover that.
Knows enough about it to know that it was a victory worth celebrating.
I'm the only one that's really been talking about it and writing about it, sounding the alarm. But I put it up on Facebook that, it was a picture of Schumer. They have been denouncing our character as a people, saying that we are, racist, this charge of structural racism and the bizarre claim by their party that black people can't manage to find identification, so that if you were to require that for voting, or say maybe getting on an airplane, that it's racist. And I just said, these people don't this is wrong.
Thinking and saying that a group of people, because of the color of their skin, are incapable of procuring a photo ID is 100% racist.
Can you imagine when we were growing up making a claim like that, and they'd be like,
That's the end of your career. Like, it's just so obviously racist, and your mother should
spank you.
Right. Something like, you don't say that.
Wash your mouth out with
That's
soap.
Crazy.
Right, but this is the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
So I object to that world. I'm pushing back against it. I'm saying things out loud that you're not supposed to say, because they can come and get you. I'm just damn tired of it. We can go into detail on what the lawless behavior was in 2020. You don't even have to talk about voting machines or anything like that.
When we come back, we're going to get into that detail. I'm talking with Kim Crockett on the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280, The Patriot. Hey, it's Jack. Sitting with me is my friend Joe Fye. He's got a podcast, Radio Free BTC. Joe, what is your podcast about?
Bitcoin.
That's cool. Do you cover other things like Minnesota politics?
Bitcoin.
What about national politics?
Bitcoin.
Do you ever get into sports? I don't talk about it a lot, but people love sports. Do you ever talk about sports?
Bitcoin.
Okay. There you have it. If you want a podcast about only Bitcoin, download Radio Free BTC wherever podcasts are sold. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm talking with Kim Crockett. She is running for Secretary of State, and she's a Republican. And are you going for the Republican endorsement, Kim?
Absolutely.
Okay, check that box. I think that's smart.
Yes.
Only because I know history, and if you don't go for the Republican endorsement, you get creamed in the primary.
Yeah, I've had a lot of nice people call me up and say, that's what you got to do, and because I've done a lot of things, as we discussed in the last segment, but running for statewide office has not been one of them. And being a city councilwoman in a little town, it's a leap from there.
At least you know that. So many people who run who make the jump from city council or mayor or the state legislature to Congress or a statewide race have no idea what they're about to do, and they think it's just what they've done before, but bigger. And it's not. it's a completely different animal.
I'm super humble about it. Have you ever seen the movie Groundhog Day?
Over and over.
Oh, there
and
you go,
over.
with Bill Murray. So
coming up.
yeah, next week. Right? No, is it?
Yeah, that would be Wednesday.
Right. It's the day after the caucuses. Caucus for Kim, by the way. Caucus for Kim. So he wakes up in Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, and every day, and it's the same day over and over until he figures something out. Right. It's a great movie. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out for next week. But I'm waking up every day. I'm Bill Murray. I hit the alarm and go, wow, am I really a statewide candidate for Secretary of State? Yes. Okay. It's time to get up.
Yep.
And here we go.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what the best part has been, Jack? I get to meet amazing people. Like I've been in the last 6, 7, 8 days, I've been to Worthington. I've been to Beaver Bay. I've been to Esco and Virginia, Minnesota. I've been in Waseca. I mean,
You've been everywhere, man.
It's fun. My little Honda's doing really well.
That was one of the great things about working the statewide campaign. First campaign I was ever on was Rod Graham's in 2000, and I had moved to Minnesota in 1996 for college, so I didn't know the state at all. And it's like, well, here's a great way to go everywhere. Hop on the bus. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, so the people are great. But you wanted to talk about substance.
Yeah,
and
let's do that.
Let's do that.
That's important.
Right, because one of my jobs is to educate voters on what the heck's been going on. It's just what I do, you know, as that policy wonk. So fire away. What are your questions?
What's a consent decree? What happened in 2020? And what can you do as Secretary of State to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, I won't sign one.
Okay. There you go.
There you go. As I said, this one and the Zuckerbucks are the two that really kind of sent me over the ledge, and I felt I had to bring my skill set forward as a citizen and defend, integrity in Minnesota. So a consent decree. I'll just give you the, tight version of this. So there's a group called Democracy Docket. Look it up.
Okay.
Run by a guy named Mark Elias. Does that name sound familiar?
It does.
People are starting to know who he is. He is the DNC lawyer for Hillary Clinton that made sure that the Steele dossier, he's behind the Steele dossier with a big deal firm that he's had to leave recently because that all came out, by the way, when his law partner got indicted by the FBI. But Perkins Coie, he is the most powerful Democrat in America who is not an elected official. Okay. And he is buddies with our Secretary of State, Steve Simon. Okay. Simon Says. So what did the Democracy Docket do? It files this fake lawsuit. It's the DNC, essentially, their firm, filing a lawsuit against a friendly Democrat Secretary of State. And Keith Ellison's office is in charge of this for the secretary. They pretend to duke it out in Ramsey County Court in front of a judge who, what's her resume? Sarah Gruing. She is the former state political director for Amy Klobuchar, as well as, she was like chief of staff at the St. Paul mayor and this, that, and the other thing. Look at her resume.
So there's a bunch of DFLers in a room pretending to duke it out in court, and
it's a pretend fight. Oh, stop it. Stop, So what was Elias looking for? Well, he was looking to help Steve Simon get what Steve couldn't get from the legislature in the spring of 2020, when he had run to the legislature saying, oh, my God, we're all going to die if we ever vote in person. We have to go to all mail-in balloting. And the legislature said, calm down. We're going to give you some accommodations, or the state accommodations for this COVID thing, because we were still wrapping our arms around it. And they did actually a very responsible job for temporary changes to election law. And Governor Walz signed it. That's how it's supposed to work.
Right.
It's called legislation.
We have a whole system. We fought a whole war
I think so.
to put this system in place where people couldn't just do whatever the hell they wanted to do.
Right, because they were an executive, right? So Steve Simon's like, well, damn, I didn't get everything I wanted. So he has this fake fight with Mark Elias in our court system, doing what? And ultimately, this is what he signed and the judge approved. Number one, 7-day extension of our voting in 2020 from November 3rd to November 7th. So there'd be time to vote or count all the absentee ballots that we're anticipating. And here's the really bad part. Waived postmarks.
Yep.
Normally you have to have it postmarked by the date of the election.
Yep.
So that we know you voted on time.
On election day or before election day, in time, before the election was over.
It's a concept.
Yep.
And then one of the protections, though, frankly, I don't know how good it is for absentee balloting, is that you have a witness that says, like I'm sitting there voting and you're my witness, and you say, yeah, this is Kim.
So the witness has to sign
your
absentee ballot.
And again, I don't know how good of a protection that is, but it's one of several that are supposed to be in place so that absentee ballots have some integrity versus that in-person voting, which frankly is much, much better.
Yeah.
So they won those three things. And what did that consent decree do? It violated the authority of the legislature, ultimately saying to we the people here in Minnesota, oh, we don't care that you are supposed to be the ones that elect people who make our laws.
Yeah, the legislature is the voice of the people because the people elect their legislator. That's how the whole system is designed
Civics
to work. Yeah.
101, right?
Yep, that's it.
But Steve Simon doesn't respect the people of Minnesota. He doesn't respect the law, and he just does whatever he wants. And that's just one example of it. And it's not Kim Crockett saying that. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals wrote a blistering opinion. There were 2 Trump electors who sued.
Okay.
And because Trump, was not certified the winner in Minnesota, that case became what's called moot under the law. But it's a blistering opinion of Mr. Simon's behavior. So that's the consent decree.
Okay.
And those were going on all over the country, by the way, Jack. It wasn't just Minnesota.
So is that how things are now? Is that the de facto law on how absentee balloting works, or is that just for the 2020 election?
I just pulled out the consent decree because one of the plaintiffs in that case asked me to, because he had that question. And I said, I'm remembering it was just 2020, but it was for both the primary and the general, by the way.
Okay.
I'm expecting him to try to do that again.
Well, and with precedent set, wouldn't he be successful?
Not with that 8th Circuit Court of Appeals opinion. I mean, we should be waving that around like a bloody shirt, right? If I am Secretary of State, I will never do that to the people of Minnesota. I will never try to run around the legislature and make law outside of the legislative process, no matter what. So that's pledge number one.
That seems to be a theme from 2020 within the DFL. Going around the legislature to do what you want, whether it's Steve Simon with the help of his buddy,
or Walz,
Ellison, and then Walz doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. We've reached a point in Minnesota where our constitutional officers really don't care what the law says, and so that's not a functioning democratic state.
Yeah. Well, why should they? They haven't been held accountable for it.
Well, who would?
Like, if a kid keeps stealing cookies out of the cookie jar and nothing happens to the kid for doing that, the kid's going to keep doing that.
How many examples? It's like, so one of the things we talked about before we came on air was that the win in the state of Virginia last November from, kind of a icky blue to a brilliant red.
Yep.
Youngkin won. Governor Youngkin won, and he's changing things. That was one of the things that finally convinced me that we could win in Minnesota in 2022, and that I wanted to be on the statewide ticket. I again will say that I think the Secretary of State campaign, especially with me as the endorsed candidate, because I know what I'm talking about, will lift all boats on the ticket. I mean, I will be able to do what I'm doing right now, is call him out and say, why did you sign that consent decree? Why did you violate the authority of our legislature in order to, work your own agenda? You couldn't get it from them. So you just went and cut a deal with the DNC in court. And that wasn't the only thing he did.
Whether it's Secretary of State's race, Attorney General race, or governor's race, when it comes time to debate the incumbent office holder, the Republicans better have candidates who know what they're talking about, because you can't go into a debate with somebody who's been doing the job for 4 years with talking points, and that's you're gonna get embarrassed if
Right.
you do that. So you have to know the subject matter, and it's not
Right.
easy subject matter. So for you, benefit of having 20 years of experience is very helpful.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. All right, when we come back, I want to find out what a Zuckerbuck is.
Oh,
I know what a Zuckerbuck is, but I've not told my listeners what a Zuckerbuck is. So when we come back after the break, we will talk about that. I am talking with Kim Crockett, who is a Republican candidate for Secretary of State on the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280, The Patriot.
Then put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties because it's cold out there. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280, The Patriot. I'm talking with Kim Crockett, a Republican candidate for Secretary of State, about all kinds of things. And Kim, let's talk Zuckerbucks.
Yeah. Some people say Zuckbucks.
Yeah.
Some people say Zuckerbucks. And there's going to be a movie coming out.
Okay.
I don't have a reference point for your listeners, but I'll share it with you when I get it.
Zuckerbucks.
So this came out of
Facebook money.
Facebook money,
Mhm.
the gabillionaire. This came out of left. This just smacked us all who were working on the election in 2020. We didn't anticipate this.
The guy and the company who censors your Facebook posts and has unqualified opinion writers, quote unquote, fact checking, put money into election administering that was supposed to be done unbiased by counties and the government and not with private money, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think you stated that very nicely. Yes, imagine if the National Rifle Association had dropped $400 million in red districts, traditionally Republican districts throughout the country, to help get out the vote.
Right. Who do you think they're going to be getting out the vote?
I wish they would, by the way, because then we get rid of Zuckerberg's influence. So this is what happened. He has a nonprofit for which he receives massive tax breaks, by the way, called Center for Tech and Civic Life. Doesn't that sound wonderful?
It sounds nice.
It sounds very
nice.
nice.
And it's a nonprofit, so therefore
it must be good.
Yes.
Yeah, sort of like George Soros and all of his nonprofits. I used to think people were crazy, by the way, who talked about Soros. They're not. He funded the last two Secretary of States in how they got into office. But anyway, back to Mr. Zuckerberg. So he has CTCL. It's all these techie Obama people, those geniuses that figured out, social media and all that way back when. And so he drops about, I've read 350 million and I've read more. And
that is an insane amount of money.
That was more than what Congress had put out to respond to COVID during the election season.
Wow.
So he spent more than our Congress on responding to COVID during the election period. We got $7 million of that here in Minnesota. I've got some detail, multi-millions in Ramsey County. Minneapolis got like 2.3. It was spread around the state. I think it's like 15 counties where absentee ballots get counted, Jack.
And
which is...
we make sure people know it is not this nonprofit doing nonprofit stuff with Zuckerberg's money. It is the nonprofit taking Zuckerberg's money and giving it to government entities.
Yes.
To do things.
Yes.
And what always comes with money? Strings.
Yes.
Always.
And it's different. Like, they totally took over the operations in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yep.
Like, there wasn't anybody left. It was all Zuckerberg people. Here, they worked side by side, I think, with election officials in very, very blue cities like Minneapolis, Hennepin County, places like that. And we're still trying to figure out how the money was spent. But at the end of the day, third-party private interests should not be funding what? The most important right we have,
Yep.
or influencing.
Yep.
I think I've decided, Jack, it's the most important right that we have, because if our vote doesn't count, if somebody can wipe it out by cheating, or a sovereign, a government official can do something to negate my vote, then what's this citizenship thing? You know?
Yeah.
I'm not part of a representative system anymore. So it is the most important right.
For people
So-
who don't know, who've never been part of an election day operation, when election judges are supposed to be evenly split amongst the parties.
Yeah, it's called
So-
party balance rule.
So when at the end of the day, throughout the day, one side's watching the other side to make sure nobody's
bet.
cheating. Now that doesn't oftentimes that doesn't happen because there aren't Republicans enough to volunteer in Minneapolis, so nobody is watching the hen house. But with Zuckerbucks, you have partisans coming in on top of that operation.
Yes.
And there's nobody. It's all wolves.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about was what's happening in this legislative session,
Yeah.
where we're the only legislature that's truly split in the U.S. right now, where the Republicans control the Senate and the Democrats control the House, and then of course we've got Walz as the governor. But watch for legislation on Zuckerberg. I do know what's going on around the country. There are many states that are going to ban it. There might be some First Amendment pushback or something. But the way that some of our legislators are thinking of it, I think, is correct, which is it's a campaign finance violation.
That's smart. Yes.
I think that's a smarter approach rather than, so it doesn't feel like an attack on speech or something like that. So watch for that this session.
Okay.
There should be bills showing up pretty soon here. The Republicans are going to try to push back. They'll be proposing voter ID again, which they've passed many times. Kiffmeyer has said, we've passed that so many times, and she's right. She has. Provisional ballots. Look for that.
Explain what that is to people.
So if I waltz in, it used to be, I'm going to sound like an old lady, get off my lawn, You used to have to register to vote.
Yep.
Like a month before elections so that the state had time to say, yeah, that's Kim.
This person actually lives here.
Right.
She is who she says she is.
She's a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
She's over 18. She's not a felon.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually lives at that address and can vote in that precinct.
Yeah.
We gave the state ample time. Now it's just sort of, hey, I'm just going to roll out of bed and walk into a polling place. I don't have any ID with me, but, I got this neighbor who can vouch for me, right? Or I register, anyway, it's sloppy.
Yeah.
So I get to vote, and my vote is counted just like my neighbors who had their act together.
Yeah. And if somebody shows up, if somebody votes and registers that day or is vouched for, whatever,
Right.
and votes, that vote gets counted.
It gets
and if
counted.
they've done it in a bunch of different precincts, all those votes get counted.
Yes. How
And
sloppy is that?
It's super sloppy.
It's disrespectful of people who, it's fraud.
It's fraud.
And
And it dilutes every other legitimate vote.
I would prosecute that
with-
aggressively with the help of a good AG.
Provisional ballots.
Provisional,
How
right.
does that solve that problem?
So if you walk in to do that same day registration, or you can't identify yourself properly, you'd be allowed to fill out a ballot, but it gets set aside. Steve Simon actually just did a Zoom thing with Amy Klobuchar, who, by the way, has really gone to the dark side.
Okay.
Her opinion of us as Americans is really quite. She thinks we're just so beyond the pale that we shouldn't be able to pass our own election laws anymore. She wants to handle it for us in Congress. But they just did a Zoom call where Steve Simon was really upset at the idea that we would have provisional ballots. He called it the maybe pile, where they put the burden on the voter to prove who they are. That's the way it is in really all of Western Europe and virtually every other state in the Union.
So it is not that the folks who show up that day and aren't registered and then register that day or are vouched for. With this system, it's not like their vote wouldn't count, but their vote would be put in the provisional ballot would be put in the maybe pile.
And they have the opportunity to prove who they are.
Yeah, and then
it's like a second shot, which I don't know that we owe people who can't get organized. It's the flabby American voter who's indulged, but they would have that opportunity, you know. And there's some good faith scenarios you could come up with where you want people to be able to vote, but the onus is on them.
Yeah.
The state shouldn't be going around, oh, can I help you? You know, I mean, that's your job as a citizen, right?
Yeah.
So look for that kind of stuff to be introduced.
Okay.
It probably won't get a hearing in the House, but it will in the Senate under Kiffmeyer's committee. The other thing to look for, do you remember all those absentee ballot applications that came flooding into your homes that were so confusing? Some even had data, your voter data, which was often filled with errors, by the way, especially the return address. Those are left-wing progressive data companies.
And unsophisticated voters, and I don't say that as a dig. I'm just saying that like most people are living their lives, so they get something in the mail that says this is your absentee ballot application. They fill it out, and they send it back to the address, and they don't know that that's going to a third-party organization. It's not going to the Secretary of State's office. It's going to somebody else who may or may not decide to forward it on to the government.
Right.
So if you are on the list that says you're Republican and you submit your absentee ballot application to a left-wing group, they might not. They've got no obligation to submit that for you. So you don't get your absentee ballot, you don't vote, and the other side that's a victory for them.
Yes. Excuse me. So watch for some legislation where they have to put on the front of it, this is not an official ballot, or this is not an official ballot application. So look for that.
All right. We are going to, we've done a lot of the policy stuff. So when we come back, we're going to talk about Kim Crockett's time in college in a band. You're listening to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280, The Patriot. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm talking with Kim Crockett, a Republican candidate for Secretary of State. She is going for the Republican Party endorsement and will abide by it. Her website is kimsos.com. That's kimsos.com. Kim, I promised the listeners at the end of the last segment that we would talk about you being in a college band. Or being in a band while in college.
Yeah.
Explain yourself.
Fifth Avenue Blues Band. Like, where were you? Oh, you were younger than me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to play at the Artist Quarter. Actually got into the Union Bar one time, which was amazing. Actually, a couple times. Williams
What do you play?
Pub.
You play? Do you sing?
I'm a singer. Yeah.
Go on.
Well, I'm not going to do that right now, but someday I'll come back and sing. I'll come back and sing to you. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. And then I did folk before that with my guitar and my long red hair, and it was fun. Yeah, so there's a side of me people just don't know about. And that's pretty much confined to at home now.
So I had a brilliant idea, though. The idea came to me during COVID madness when nobody was getting together in person. But I want to host the people I know, talent shows.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Because there are people like yourself
Yeah.
who have a whole other side of them that nobody knows about. And wouldn't that be fun?
I could be a singing Secretary of State. And we'll start with the Sting song, Sending Out an SOS.
There you go.
That's why I did kimsos.com. Plus, it's easy. You don't have to spell, like I said before, you don't have to spell Crockett.
Just one M and Kim. Just so many
Yes.
angles on kimsos.com.
Yes. So I'll sing that. I'll come to your party. So can we talk about the Virginia plan?
Yes. Who is, I really should have looked this up beforehand, the Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli.
Ken Cuccinelli's a good friend of mine.
I have gotten to know him a bit through my day job,
Isn't he fun?
and what a smart, fun, just great guy.
Yeah.
And,
Big critic of the Republican Party again.
Yep.
Former AG of Virginia, and he was with the Department of Homeland Security under Trump.
Yep.
And he's a fighter. Super smart guy, very principled, and one of my dear advisors.
I took a lesson from getting to know him a little bit about my own election losses.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, it's got nothing to do with you
Yeah.
because he should be president. He's that great of a candidate, person, thinker,
Yeah.
and he ran for governor and lost
Yeah, I
in
don't lift
Virginia,
him to anything.
and not because he wasn't qualified, and because he certainly is, and Virginia is now hopefully swinging the other way.
Well, right. So I'm part of this national group called Election Integrity Network, and we meet twice a week. We meet on Tuesday afternoons and Friday mornings. I just had an hour-long call this morning, which is partly how I know what's going on around the country, and that keeps me super educated as your future Secretary of State.
Okay.
Because I can see what's going on around the country and what needs to get done. And Ken Cuccinelli, but also Ken Blackwell, the former Secretary of State of Ohio, who's just an amazing, he's like our dad on the call. He's the senior statesman who reminds us of our duties of citizenship.
Sure.
You know, when Republicans are tempted to follow the flabby citizen model and, oh, what can we do to coddle you today? He likes to remind us as a senior statesman that we have duties as citizens to be informed before we vote, to be prepared before we vote. It's a duty. It's a flip side to the privilege of voting is the duty that comes with it as a citizen. So I said before that one of the things that convinced me that I could do this, and it wouldn't just be me, it would be the gubernatorial race, the AG race. Hopefully we'll find a state auditor. Those are the 4 constitutional offices, right? That we could win this thing was that Virginia flipped in November. Yeah. And I got to watch that whole task force get put together. And Cuccinelli's key to that, and other people. And let me tell this, I call it the Virginia plan for Minnesota. This is what I want to do here, is flip us from, blue to red. Yep. They put eyes on every ballot in Virginia. What does that mean? Well, the RNC came in with some of the best people, one of whom I've met and worked with. And worked with 80 grassroots organizations, including Jenny Beth Martin's Tea Party Patriots.
I know her too.
Those are cats and dogs that normally go, oh, I don't like you.
Yeah, to get the RNC and the Tea Party Patriots to cooperate on something.
Yeah, it's kind of like getting Draz's minority caucus in the House, to hang tight with other Republicans. So the way they put it is everybody laid down their weapons at the door, their egos, their weapons, and they said, how do we get eyes on every ballot in Virginia? And they recruited election judges for their ballot boards, their precincts, so they had 93% coverage. Guess what the percentage was prior to last fall?
40.
It was like 20% of Republicans. So when we talk about elections, part of what we need to acknowledge as Republicans is we do a really lousy job of showing up. The Democrats in Minnesota always have plenty of election judges. Yep. And I'm going to tell you about how Simon puts his thumb on that scale. Okay. Republicans don't show up. They don't volunteer. I had somebody who's been in the politics for years tell me last night she's never heard of a ballot board. Okay. Right? Yeah. So you have 2 different things going on. This is our challenge. Will that red wave that I think is coming, I think you do too.
I do too.
Across the nation, will it just hit like a hard brick wall at Minnesota's borders, or will we open the gates?
If we assume that it's going to happen, it'll happen less here. If we look at Virginia and see how it was started, then and copy some of those things or all of those things, that we could take full advantage of the wave that's coming.
So part of what I'm doing, Jack, is jumping up and down with our representatives at the RNC.
Okay.
I know the guy who runs the election integrity stuff for the RNC. I'm trying to get on Jetty Beth Martin's radar. I'm just jumping up and down all the time saying, come to Minnesota.
Okay.
Come to Minnesota. Because we need a head of the task force.
I can connect you with her.
That would be great. That would be great. They had these 80 grassroots organizations. Some were only like 10 people, but they were boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And here's the challenge, and this is important for Minnesotans to understand. We have a party balance rule, as you said before. The Democrat and Republicans sitting across the table from each other on Election Day, keeping it honest, right?
Yep.
We have excluded, Steve Simon has excluded that from the ballot boards that count absentee ballots. And here's why
Really?
it matters. 58% of the vote, Jack, in 2020 was absentee. 6 out of 10 votes.
And there's no balance on the board that
Out of 87
those.
counties, maybe 2, 3, 4 of them welcomed Republicans, but some only because Andy Sillick's group had sued them.
All right, 30 seconds. What's your message to my listeners?
Caucus for me next week.
Okay, that's
Support my campaign. Go to kimsos.com. This is a serious job. This is a serious candidate in front of you. And I want to be your next Secretary of State, but I cannot do it without your help.
Thank you very much, Kim Crockett, candidate for Secretary of State. Her website is kimsos.com. And thank you, listeners, for listening.